In our last video, we talked about how we could take our leg and create a spine to continue with our custom rig. Today we're going to continue again, but this time we're going to look at arms and fingers. So to start that, what I want to do, and this is how I do things, if you do things differently, that's perfectly fine. You do how you know. If you're not sure, then you're welcome to follow along with me. So what I'm going to do is go to my top view by either hitting T on the keyboard, or I can right click up here and choose top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Create tab because I want to create something. Go to my Systems and again go to Bones. And what I'm going to do is make an arm. I'm going to start with a clavicle or a shoulder. So maybe we'll have a shoulder bone here. Then I'm going to say my upper arm and I'm going to have it bent a little bit. And we'll go over why. A lower arm, we'll come back to where we were, and then a hand. And when I get done creating my object, I'm going to right click, and we don't need that little nub, so I'm just going to delete it. Okay. After I created everything, now I'm going to come and name it. So I'm going to say this is my left shoulder. I even spelled it correctly. Then maybe left upper arm. Left lower arm or left forearm, and hand. Left hand. Ooh. Okay, so I've got the bones created that I'm going to need for my basic custom rig. And I created it in the top view so that my bones, I don't have to worry about if they're aligned correctly. So from here, what I want to do, much like I did with my leg, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about with what we're going to do next, then I would invite you to go look at the video about how we created a custom leg. What I'm going to do is convert this, or rather create an IK system for this FK bone system that we currently have. In order to do that, I'm going to click my upper arm, go to Animation, IK Solvers, and I'm going to choose a limb solver because I'm trying to create a limb. I'm going to click on that, and then 3ds Max with my dotted line is saying, okay, what do you want me to do next? What part are you talking about? And I'm going to choose the hand. And now what we see is I have this IK chain that's telling me it's connected from the upper arm to the hand. And if I move this or manipulate this IK chain, we see now it's moving kind of like a hand would or an arm. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and rename this IK chain. So I'm going to say maybe left arm IK. Okay, just so I know what it is. I don't think I did this one, so maybe we'll do, I'm going to rename all of them. So maybe left leg IK. Over here to this one for the right leg and name it right leg IK. And as I've said in several videos, what I would do is get into a good habit of naming everything that you create. Even if you know what it is, if someone else has to come in and use your file that you've created, they may not know how you have anything set up. So if they're looking for a shoulder and they have to look in the Scene Explorer and they just see bone 001 through bone 0979, well, they don't have any idea of knowing what anything is. So we're just trying to make it easier for them and easier for us as well. Okay, so I've got my arm created. I've got my IK system created. I've renamed my IK system. So now I'm going to start creating some controls for these bones. Ultimately, when we have a custom rig, it's okay if we don't touch the bones at all. If we just use the controls to animate for our bones, that's perfectly fine. So I'm going to create a controller for the shoulder, a controller for the hand, and a controller for the elbow, much like we did with the foot plus the shoulder. Okay, so I'm going to, again, I like to use shapes and I like to use circles. So I'm going to create a circle for my shoulder, a circle for my hand, and ultimately I'm going to have one for my elbow too. And I'm just going to put it here for right now, even though we're going to change it. So I've created them. Now we need to name it. I'm going to say left shoulder, control, then left elbow control, if I could spell, and left hand control. Okay, so now that we have these controls, let's set them up. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that these controls are all aligned to the bones that they're going to be controlling. So I've got my left shoulder control. I'm going to align it to my left shoulder. Position. Okay, rotation, I'm okay with it being like it is. And then here with the shoulder, I'm going to do the same thing with the forearm. Okay, and then my hand, the same thing for my left hand. Okay. Now, this is something that I like to do. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I like my controls to be a certain way. So I'm going to rotate this, the hand control, 90 degrees. So I'm perpendicular to my hand. My shoulder is going to be kind of parallel. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. It's kind of parallel. And then my shoulder, I'm going to leave alone. Okay. So much like we did with our spine, I'm going to choose my shoulder bone, go to Animation, Constraints, Position Constraint, and then Animation, Constraint, Orientation Constraint. And we'll notice that when I click this, we moved a little bit. So if we wanted to, we can click on Keep Initial Offset. That will move it back where it was. Now with the hand, it's going to be a little bit different. I actually have to, instead of doing a constraint, I'm going to link this left arm IK node. I'm going to put it as a child of my left hand control. Now I can either do that with the select and link, or I can come into my Scene Explorer and just say my left arm IK is going to be controlled by my left hand control. So now when I move my left hand control, it moves my IK as well. So that will control my IK, but it doesn't control my hand. For example, if I rotate it, it doesn't do anything for my hand. So I'm going to select my hand, Animation, Constraints, Orientation Constraint, select on my hand control, and it's going to break it. So we'll just keep initial offset. Okay. So now not only can we control our IK system, that IK node, but we can also rotate it to rotate our hand. Now much like we did with the leg, we're not done here with the elbow. I'm going to move this back a little bit away from my elbow on just one axis, and then I'm going to again select that IK node, go into my Motion tab, and what I'm looking for, what I'm looking for is my IK Solver Properties Swivel Angle, which is, I'm going to leave this as 0, but I want to pick the target that I want to use as my swivel control. I'm going to click None, click on my elbow, and if we did this correctly, our elbow shouldn't move at all. So we saw no movement, so we're not even sure, is it even working? Well, let's select it and move it up and down. We can see that our elbow is swiveling. Our elbow controller is controlling it. So we're good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to select my, let's do another thing first. So I've got my arm selected, my controllers are working. Now let's create the fingers. So again, I'm going to go to my Create tab in my bones, in my System and Bones, and I'm going to create 4 fingers and 1 thumb. So let's start with maybe the pinky. Okay. Then the ring finger. It'll be a little longer. Then the middle finger, which is a little longer. And then my pointer finger, which is about the same length as our ring finger, and then our thumb. And our thumb, what we want to make sure that we're doing is if we were to take our hands, palms facing down, and extend them to the side, kind of like we have airplane wings, we'll notice that our thumb is pointing towards the front of our body. It's not pointing behind us. It's not pointing down. It's pointing in front of us. This is what I mean by that. Here is our thumb. We're going to bring it in a little bit. There we go. There's our thumb. Now, if we need to move these, we definitely can to make them a little bit more in line with where we want them to be. If we need to adjust them, then we can do that as well by going to Animation Bone Tools. If we turn our Bone Edit mode on, maybe this one is a little bit too long, well, we can adjust that. Whatever we need to do. Make sure you turn Bone Edit mode off when you're done with it. And now I have my fingers. And what I'm going to do is I need to make all of these fingers, these top joints, children of the hand. So I'm going to click, and then I'm going to hold Control and click these other ones. And then what I like to do, it's kind of easy, is just do a select and link, click and drag, and now I've got all of my fingers that I can put on my hand at one time. Done. Okay, now if I select and move my hand using my hand control, you see all my fingers move as well. So then what I'm going to do is select my shoulder control, elbow control, hand control, and I'm going to move those so that they're up kind of in between chest, maybe the chest and the neck, somewhere in there. This, like I said, this would be a lot easier if we had a mesh, but we don't. So we're just kind of wing it. Okay, that looks good to me. And I want this shoulder control to be a parent of the chest. So I can either do it in my Scene Explorer. So let's see, where's the chest? Here. Okay, and I'm going to take that shoulder control and drag it underneath the chest control. So now my chest control is a parent. So if I rotate it, we'll see that my shoulder moves as well. So we have our arm basically set up. Okay, we don't have any controls for the fingers. And for what we're going to do, you can definitely set your fingers up the way that we've set up these other things. If we wanted to have a control for each bone, we can. But typically, when we animate hands, our fingers kind of all, you know, if we rotate our pointer finger, most of the time, all three joints in our fingers rotate, like we're closing a fist. Not necessarily all fingers, but all joints in that finger do. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a wiring parameter. And I do have a video up on wiring parameters if you need to go back and take a look at that to kind of understand what we're going to do. And I'm only going to show you one finger because the way we would do all the other ones is pretty much the same. So I'm going to create a wiring parameter by going to my Create tab because I want to create something. And wiring parameters are under Helpers. So I'm going to click on Helpers, do my drop down until I see Manipulators. And I'm going to choose a slider. I'm going to name my slider, the label that I'll see on the screen. So I'm going to say left pointer slider. And then the value, the minimum and the maximum. The value is the value that the slider is going to be when we create it. The minimum is the minimum value it can be. The maximum is the maximum value it can be. X, Y position, we're not worried because we haven't placed it anywhere yet. Same as the width. If we want it to snap to a certain amount, we can turn on snap, and then our snap value is 0.01. If we had between 0.1 and 100, if we had between value 1 and 100, and we wanted to snap every one digit, so like 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, then we could change the snap value to 1. But for what we're going to do, we're going to leave 0.01 alone. We're going to come in our scene, click, and now we see left pointer slider, which is what we named it, and boy, I named it wrong. So I'm going to select it, go into my Modify tab, and I can fix my spelling mistake. And we also see that my label is left pointer slider, but the name of the manipulator itself is slider manipulator 01. So I'm going to change it to be left pointer finger slider. And I can change that here as well. I don't want to forget that finger in case someone else is working in my file and they don't know what it is. Okay. So now I have my manipulator created. If I want to move it, I can. As long as I turn on my select and manipulate, then I can move it where I want. And we'll see the XY position change as well. I'm going to turn that back off. And then what we're going to do is go over how to wire one of these. And since I've selected my left pointer finger, I'm going to show you how to use the wiring parameters for the left pointer finger. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on, well, first let's name it. That would be helpful. Here I am telling you to always name your stuff, and I forgot to name it. So I'm going to say left pointer, I'm going to say left upper pointer finger. Then left mid pointer finger, and then left end. So now I know what they are. I know this is the upper bone in my pointer finger, this is the mid bone in my pointer finger, and this is the end bone of my pointer finger. You can name those however you want, as long as you remember what they are and somebody else can figure out what they are. So then for my wiring parameter, I'm going to click one of my bones, right click, go to wiring parameters. There are other ways, and we're going to go over another way, but this is the way that I like to do it. So wiring parameters, and then it gives us options. We want to rotate our finger bone, so I'm going to go to transform rotation, and I believe that it's on the Y rotation. We can check real quick. So we're going to rotate, and it's on our Y rotation. We can see down here when we rotate, this number down here changes, so we know it's a Y rotation. I'm going to say, let's see, wiring parameters, transform rotation, Y rotation, and we want it to be controlled by this pointer. But we don't want it to be controlled by the position of the slider. We want it to be controlled by the value of the slider. And so now we have the wiring parameter dialog. And the reason why we can do how we just did, where we right click on all these things, is because now in our wiring parameter dialog, everything is set up for us. We have our left upper finger and our left pointer finger slider. And we want our slider to control our left upper finger, so we're going to say the left pointer finger controls our left upper finger. Our slider controls our bone. Whichever way, whatever you want to be controlled, your arrow should point towards what you want to be controlled. Now, I know from my wiring parameters video that if I just do a straight value, it's going to be too much. So I'm not going to bore you with figuring that out. I'm just going to say the value divided by 75, and I'm going to connect it. And I'm going to close this. Now, if I turn my select and manipulate back on so I can use my slider, we'll see that now my slider controls the rotation of that finger. So let's go into another way on how we can create our wiring parameters. So instead, I'm going to click on my second bone. I'm going to go to Animation, Wiring Parameters, and I'm just going to say Parameter Wire Dialog. So that brings that back up. But as you can see, nothing is filled out for us already. Instead, what I'm going to do is I already have that bone selected, so I'm going to basically refresh of what's selected, and we'll see my left pointer finger. I'm going to open that because I want the rotation, the Y rotation. Then I'm going to come over here and select my slider, and again do my refresh, and here's my slider and the value, and I want my value to control my bone, so I'm going to choose my left arrow, and then again value divided by 75. I'm going to connect it. Now what we see is that we have two bones that are being controlled by that wiring parameter. So I'm going to quickly do my wiring parameter for this last in bone. So transform rotation, Y rotation, and I want the value here. I want it to control this way, divided by 75. Just divide by 75, please, not multiply, and connect it. And now I have all three bones are being controlled by my slider. Okay, now, the last thing I'm going to show, and I'm not going to go over these other fingers because if we know how to do it on one finger, we can do it on every other finger. All we do is name them what we want them to, create sliders, do wiring parameters to control the sliders. But we are going to do a neat little trick. Okay, we're going to select everything. And honestly, I would do what we're about to do before you do any wiring parameters. Because when we do what we're about to, when we copy the arm from one side to the other, our wiring parameters can get messed up. Not always, but it can happen. So here I've got everything, my arm, my elbow, upper arm, lower arm, hand, fingers, all my controllers for the arm selected, and I'm going to mirror it. Now, when we mirrored it, what it did is it mirrored it, but it didn't create a copy of it. So I'm going to click copy, we'll click OK. Then here, this is my new one, so I'm going to select my shoulder, my elbow, and my hand. I'm going to move this over, turn off my manipulate, and I'm going to move this over to the other side of my body. So we don't have to do all that work that we did before. Now again, we'll have to create more wiring parameters for our fingers if we wanted to do wiring parameters. We'll need to go back and rename everything. So instead of left shoulder 001, this is actually now the right shoulder. So we'll have to go back and rename everything, but it's definitely going to save us a little bit of time because we don't have to recreate everything. So with what we're going to do with a basic rig that we've created ourselves, we're going to call this pretty good. We're going to say this is just fine. This is as far as we're going to go. Now, there's a lot of other things that we can do, but for just a basic rig to figure out how to use bone systems and constraints and wiring parameters and controllers, we're going to say we're good here. So what I would recommend is to go ahead and play around with all of these things. You know, try to figure out, instead of just doing a person, can we do something like a horse or an animal, a bat, a fish, a centaur, a dragon? Whatever it is that we want to do, we can use these same tools to create all of those things. So play around with that and have a lot of fun.